Simone, thank you so much for joining us on the Pillow Talk Sessions podcast. It's really, really exciting to have you on and get your perspectives, because I know you've got really interesting ways or interesting thoughts on hospitality and insights to share. So before we sort of get into the meat of the topic, could you give us a little bit of background on yourself and also Travel Singularity for our audience who may not already know you?
So thank you so much for the invitation. It's always a pleasure. My name is Simone. I've been working in the industry for 26 years. This year, unfortunately. And the first part of my career has been in hotels. So I ended up being a GM for a small group of boutique hotels in Rome. I started getting a little bored of that, and I wanted to focus a little more on the marketing side. And especially, I was always fascinated about the level of technology you can introduce in an industry that is very service-centered, very anthropocentric to a certain extent. So I started consulting with a couple of web agencies, and then a few years ago I opened my own consulting firm that is called Travel Singularity. So it's pretty much in the name. You know, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to educate hotels to integrate some level of technology without completely changing what they're doing. Right? I have written 5 books, yes, and I do a lot of stuff in the academic world, mainly guest lecturer for MBAs. I'm in the board of a dozen companies, mainly travel tech vendors. And on top of Travel Singularity, I do have another company. It's called Review, and it's basically an AI startup replying with artificial intelligence to hotel reviews. And I think that's pretty much it.
That's brilliant, Simone. And I know that you've been described as a futurist, and about being able to kind of look at the future of hotels and technology and hospitality. And so one of the topics that we really love to explore on this podcast is how hospitality and service-driven principles, hospitality principles, if you like, kind of are infiltrating modern rental living. Really, hospitality beyond hotels. So what we'd love to talk to you about is, you think, like, what do you think of that sort of hospitality mindset and how it's applied to other forms of lodging, like co-living, built to rent, student living, that sort of thing? So are you seeing much of that, or do you have thoughts on that?
I think you described it perfectly, because hospitality is a mindset. It has literally nothing to do with the buildings. And I think the main thing is that we still have this dogma that hospitality to a certain extent belongs exclusively to hotels, but it's never been the case. And we first started understanding that with, first of all, bed and breakfast, that for a lot of people, they are not really hotels, even though they offer quite a similar experience, and in some cases, even a more meaningful experiences. And I would say that we really understood that during COVID. Now, the thing with COVID is, as you may remember, at some point, even players like Booking.com started writing on the website, if you really need to travel, it's better not to go to hotels, because there will be other humans there, right? So maybe you want to go to an apartment. And I think this was for a lot of people, me included. I was totally, as a traveler, I was totally against anything that was not hotels. It's probably a professional thing. But to me, it was interesting to see this transition of people that never had an experience with an apartment, really thought that an apartment was something cheap, or like you could not get any kind of good service. And they completely fell in love with apartments, to the level that now when they want to book, they would probably go with apartment as the first option. So I think that when we talk about hospitality is more about architecture of caring about people, empathy. Of course, it's something we unfortunately forget quite a lot, and where technology can actually help by quite a lot. And ultimately, it's human connections, right? So if this is going to happen in a multifamily BTR industry, or in a 5-star hotel, or a B&B, or an apart hotel, doesn't really make any difference. It's all about creating spaces that are not only efficient, because on the BTR co-living side is probably more about efficiency, but it's more about creating something that is actually meaningful, right? So I would say that what the industry can learn from the hospitality space is about creating these spaces, right? And design these spaces around the human rhythms, whatever they are, right? It's really something that in hotels we understood it a little better because we had, well, I think mainly because we got a lot of people going in and going out on a daily basis. For a lot of destinations, the average stay is less than 3 nights, so you can understand. And you get in touch with so many different needs and so many different requests, privacy wise, service wise, that you really understand that you really need to design your property around the needs of your guests. But again, I don't see a big difference. I think that this dualistic view of the industry is probably per se is problematic because it's really not there, right? And on top of that, if you think about it, when you and I'm 46 now, and I remember when I was traveling as a young kid, I remember that hotels were something very different from my apartment, right? They had better technologies. Like the
Yeah.
first flat screen I saw, it was in a hotel. They said, "Wow, this is amazing," right? And it is amazing audio equipments and so forth, right? While now this is pretty much the other way around. You go to a hotel and it's very likely that the technology they do have is worse than the one you do have in your apartment. So I think that there's also a level of, we lost some level of wow effect there. So it's all about designing around the experience. And I think every industry can do that.
Yeah, you've said so much there that I want to unpack, but I've got 2 questions or 2 points actually to make. And we have had a guest previously on the show that talked about that, how hotels were aspirational. You'd go and stay and it'd be totally, you've talked about it from a tech perspective. This guest was talking about, that it would be a bed that you just wouldn't have at home and sort of linen and things like that. But now we all kind of, it's more normal for us to have those things. So hotels are sort of less aspirational, perhaps. And you're talking about it from a tech side. But the other thing, what I would love you to talk a little bit more about, and it's one of the other themes that we talk about on this podcast, which is how technology is shaping resident experiences. We do look at it the operational side as well, but the guest residential experiences. And you said that one of the hospitality principles is empathy, and you say tech can help us with empathy. Can you go a little bit deeper and help us understand what that means?
Big time. And this is probably my favorite question. So if you think about it, because we got this very dichotomy, fake dichotomy, false dichotomy, humans versus technology, right? Natural versus artificial. Now, if you look closely, and you don't have to look into the industry, you can just look at us as a species, right? We evolved to what we are right now because of technology, right? If you think about it, we use tool, and because we do use tool is, it created this very anthropocentric planet. Now, the thing, we can even push it even further by saying that it actually, technology is what makes us human, right? If you think about it. So I wouldn't look at it with a very black or white kind of approach. I will look at more as using technology as a tool, as a facilitator for something. Now, there's a bias though, and whenever you talk about technology in the hospitality space, the first thing that everybody thinks about is replacing the front end, right? So you start talking about AI and everybody is coming up with, robots taking the place of receptionists. That's never the case. The thing we want to do in hospitality, that we're trying to do, and it's also what I try to do with my consulting firm, is trying to make sure that everything that can be automated and will not have an impact on the guest and on the staff should be automated, so that you have more time to focus on what is really important, that it's the empathy we were talking before. So we can say that to a certain extent, technology is an empathy enabler, right? Because now it gives us back time that we can sit down and have an experience. Now, let me tell you a story. I will not tell you the brand, but it's a story that I've said like, billion times now. And I traveled quite a lot, right? We're talking maybe 200 nights a year in my worst year. So, and I've been doing this for 15 years now. And I don't really remember a good check-in experience. This is mainly because, usually when you get to the counter, to the desk, the only thing kind of interaction is very logistical. Give me your passport, give me your credit card. That's pretty much it, And on top of that, you are behind a desk. So you got this power imbalance that is, you don't think about, but it's problematic. And you are in a position of vulnerability on top of that, right? Probably you need to go to the toilet after, a long flight. And so you are now in this strange position. But we ask our people to actually do all of these logistic tasks that can be and should be automated. Automate that, we go back to the human interaction. So I remember this guy, and I will not tell the name of the brand, but I checked in and they had this beautiful kiosks for self-check-ins. So I started checking myself, and the guy came to me and said, look, there are a couple of things that I can do for you. The first one is I can check you in, so I can take care of the logistics, or we can sit down, have a drink, and I tell you more about the destination. And of course, I checked myself in, we sat down, he offered me a couple of beers. We talked a little about the destination. This is the only check-in experience that I do remember and I do tell to other people. Even when I teach, I talk about that. And why is that? Because everything that was not necessarily adding something to my experience was managed by technology. And now I could get this guy outside of the desk instead of head down, just putting numbers on a PMS or whatever. It could really create some level of interaction. Now, you can argue that this could have been for marketing purposes, so it was not natural interaction, but still it was a good interaction to me. So I would say that this is really the main point is you do not have to lose the personal touch, and you do not have to lose this human connection. Actually, if you do it right, you can facilitate that with technology. But again, if we think about tomorrow going into an apartment and having robots all around, that's not probably going to be the case. But if there's anything in the background that can be automated, and now we can replace these humans to do what they do best, that is basically what we need to do. You see my point?
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess that kind of goes into, AI, of course, was a big topic. If anybody went to ITB, AI was everywhere. Everybody was talking about it. So I guess, are there specific areas where automation and AI work best? And in this case, in residential spaces, and, where does the human interaction kind of remain irreplaceable, do you think?
So, well, AI is a big word, okay? Because basically under this big umbrella now, we're putting everything that is automation and technology, RPA, whatever. It's everything. It's under AI. That to a certain extent it makes sense, right? So I'm not totally against that. To me, it's just, and of course you start with the basics, and the basics are everything that is not really increasing the experience for the guests, for the people working in the hotel, and for that interaction. And that is getting rid of everything that is just, repetitive work, tasks that are like super boring and so forth. And of course, when you got into co-living, you get a lot of that, right? You get a lot of paperwork to do. It's painful, right? And I can totally see AI taking care of that, right? And again, especially now with hospitality, for example, we got a big problem with labor shortage, right? Probably you heard about that, but over the last few years, it's been worse and worse. And we need to do more with less people. That's the harsh reality of that. So it's more about finding all the things that we do with humans today, but are not really improving the experience, and trying to use some level of automation there. And again, it doesn't need to be AI per se, it could be anything else. Again, the problem is when we talk about artificial intelligence, I think the problem is that intelligence part, because when you say artificial intelligence, basically what you are implying is that there's somebody else that is probably going to be smarter than you, and it could be a threat, right? So that is why probably it's better to talk about automation, because basically what we want to do is we want to get rid of stupid things. The example I always make is, probably you remember the movies from the 50s when you got two people talking to each other over a phone, and now you got all these, usually very beautiful women connecting jacks, to connect the phone calls. And we do not have that today, but nobody's complaining about the quality of the conversation because there's no human aspect to that, right? We're doing this. I'm not expecting somebody to put jacks all around, but still we're getting a good conversation. So it's more something that I would say organically gets into the background to a point where you wake up. I think a beautiful way of saying this is you wake up 5 years after you implemented that solution and you look at it and say, we were doing this by hand 5 years ago? really, we were completely nuts. So this is really the kind of AI that I'm looking into pretty much every industry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say you brought up, in the 50s they had, these phone operators changing the jacks. That was the expectations of that generation. As these future generations are more accepting of this fully automated living experience, will like Gen Z or Gen Alpha now, will they just not even care about the human engagement, or will it always be a key factor in this living sector?
This is an amazing question. Well, first of all, I don't like to think in terms of generations, right? Because like if I start thinking in terms of generation, I will be very hard to put into any kind of box, right? Because I'm getting old, but I'm the kind of guy that with every kind of experience, I want to go fully automated, right? So this is usually my thing. So when I do have time, I can get like real human interaction. So I would say that is the first thing. The second thing is that we have this bias and we think we know our customers, and this can be of everything, right? Hotels, rentals, really any industry. And we try to fit our customers into boxes that sometimes they never fit, actually, right? So will they care less about the personal touch? Some of them, sure. But some of them already do, Maybe they are more concerned about privacy. They're more concerned about the fact that they don't have to talk to anybody if they got a problem. That's another big, that's it does apply to me as well, but I teach a lot of kids in their 20s, right? Now, and they're amazing, beautiful MBAs, super smart. But if you ask them to call to book a table to get a drink, forget about that. They will not have that skill. They lost that skill to talk to other humans. Would they want some level of very human-centric experience? No, I don't think so, right? Maybe some of them. But so it's more about understanding that our needs change, and it's not necessarily generational, right? I always make this example. It's a funny one, but when I was a kid, I was always into computers, and I really wanted to learn how to code. And I think it was 6 or 7, and my father couldn't understand it. At some point, he said, "Why you want to do that? Why don't you go outside and play football with all your friends like all the normal kids?" And my father is still alive. He's 70 now, and I put a little malware on his phone so I can track whatever he does. He basically, sorry, Dad, but he basically
Now he knows.
now he knows.
Yeah,
He doesn't
cat's out.
speak English. Doesn't speak English, so that's fine. He will never figure it out. But he spends like 8 hours a day on the internet today. That is the same guy. The same guy that was telling me go outside and play football. That's the same guy spending 8 hours a day on the internet. So it's not only generational. I think it's at some point, if any technology that will make our life easier will be massively adopted, no matter what, if we like it or not.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So because even when you think you're not going to be the one who then, takes up some technology, you are, because if it makes your life easier, of course, we'll all go for it. Just keeping on the technology theme, and I just want to go back to what you said about the story that you told about the experience that you'd had at the front desk and when the chap sat down and told you about the destination. You also talked about how talent is such an issue in hospitality. It also is in the rental living sectors, and many of the rental living sectors are trying to get hospitality people to come and join in their thing. So I just want to sort of say that. But and you also talked about technology being a facilitator, an enabler facilitator. And actually, in that hotel where you had the really great experience of checking in, before it probably wasn't necessarily an either or. Either you would have someone checking you in, or you'd have someone being able to give you the time to tell you about the destination. They may have had 2 people, one checking in and one doing the experience and the talking. So what technology has allowed is, instead of having 2 people doing the job, there's one person doing the job that really adds value to your experience. But if we sort of move on a little bit and talk about technology, again, in hospitality, there's a lot of technology available to hoteliers. But if we were to look at how the kinds of technology or the ways that the hotel sector is using technology to enable operations as well as experience, if we were to sort of transport that into the residential rental areas, So it could be anything from the retirement living to the student to the co-living to the built to rent. What can we learn? What can operators in that sector learn from hoteliers' experience of creating tech-enabled spaces?
I would say most of it. Well, first of all, let me go back 1 second because I know you guys are trying to get people from the hospitality space, talents from the hospitality space. That's not going to be easy. Let me give you a statistics. Like 50% of the students finishing the MBA at EHL, that's #1 school of hospitality in the world that I teach from time to time. Amazing guys, like brilliant students. 50% of them, and this is like the official data of the students, they will not go into the hospitality space. They will go somewhere else. Your question totally makes sense because the hospitality school today is more a school about understanding soft skills and interactions, right? That you can then use in the rental space, for example, you can use in retail, wealth management, no matter what, right? So first part. Second part, with hotels, we've been using a lot of AI and a lot of technology for years. If you think about it, even to operate a small 20-room property, you need a lot of technology, right? You need at least probably 6 or 10 software to run it. So we always say that we are a very traditional industry. We are not at all. We're slow in adapting mainly because we work with outdated technologies, but we use a lot of technology, right? So I would say that for the co-living and the renting space, a great approach could be to use technology to focus on personalization, right? That is really what is all about. Because in hotels, what you need to understand is in hotels, you got people getting in and out all the time. So even with information you do have about these guests, you do have a tiny amount of information. So you want to personalize, but you personalize based on a very small set of data, right? Maybe it's like somebody like me, I book on booking.com and I show up, I go, I don't have any interaction. Usually it's for work. You don't know much about me, right? It's very hard to personalize. If I'm staying in your hotel, usually I sleep only 1 night or 2 nights. There's nothing you know about me. Maybe you know that if you got to have a gym, I will go to the gym if I have time, but that's pretty much it, right? Now, in the rental space, though, that's a whole different story because you got these people for a very long time, and you can pretty much understand everything they do, and this could be anything from the interaction they do have with the other people. It could be with interaction they do have with the spaces as well. Especially imagine you got some level of IoT. That is something I will not push too much into the hospitality space because again, it's hard. You need to learn. There's a learning curve for IoT that you will not, you don't want to go through that if you're staying 1 night, right? You really want a big button that says, turn off of the light so I can go to bed. You don't want IoT, that's, and this is coming from somebody that is super, a techie, but I hate IoT in hotels. IoT in this industry, though, it could be a lifesaver because now you can understand exactly what's going on in that room on a longer period of time. So, okay, what's the temperature like? This guy always take a shower at 7 p.m. What's going on? And all this information can help you personalize the product. So I would say that this is something that it would be great. It would be a dream for us because we don't have that kind of information. We kind of have it maybe for repeating customers, business, or to a certain extent, you have it with resorts with longer period of time. But this is really a goldmine of information that you can use. And you can also use to redesign new spaces, for example, now that you know information about these users, even to market the spaces you do have correctly. And to connect to what I was telling you before, that is why I don't like to think in terms of generation. I really try to think in terms of humans and single humans, in terms of Jessica, Christian, and Simone. What do they do? And how can I personalize for making your experience better and for making the experience of people similar to Simone, Christian, and Jessica better. So I think there's a lot of data that you do have. You're really sitting on a gold mine that you can actually, it's just, an AI prompt away to understand what to do with this data. I would say that's the number one. In hospitality, we got a lot of other things going on, especially because, first of all, it's dynamic pricing. You don't have a lot of that, right? Because, you 20 guests sleeping in the same hotel, same room type, same night, they pay 20 different prices, right? So it's really a problem that is so typical to hotels and airline companies that does not really doesn't. We do use a lot of AI for CRM, marketing automation, with customers. Again, because we know so little, now we try to squeeze every kind of information we can. So, that is why after you make a reservation in a hotel, you start receiving like a ton of emails, probably too much, because we want to know more about you, and it's not because we're freaking stalkers. It's just because we don't have enough information. And just, we want to make your stay better. Another use that probably you guys can inherit from us is we use a lot of AI to advertising campaigns, And of course, you do not advertise as much as we do because, again, we need to get, every night we need to get 100 customers to fill our property. But that's a lot to be learned there. If you start looking at all the interaction you had with your users and you sum it up with all the information that you have in IoT, and you can really create some really personalized message. And I would say that more than thinking in terms of what Gen Z wants, what Gen X wants, is more about, okay, we got this level of data, we can personalize how narrow we can go to make sure that when we talk to Simone, this is exactly what Simone wants with some level of approximation. Does it make sense?
Totally. It's such an interesting topic, personalization, because I know in hotels we're not there, in terms of what we'd love to be able to do. It's still not happening really. But if I think about in the rental sector, the modern rental sector or service living sectors, even though, like you've explained it really clearly, it should be really quite simple to be able to personalize and market to individuals because of the wealth of data. But those sectors are even way further down behind than hotel in actually implementing that and using technology in a way and using data in a way and using AI in a way that really allows it's just not there yet. But you've really explained the possibilities of, if that stuff is harnessed well, how not just for marketing to residents, but actually that resident experience, making sure that it's so personalized. What a difference. And I'm sure we'll get there, but definitely not there yet.
Well, let me tell you something. For example, we see that the gym is always packed at 5 p.m., right? This is information that we have right now. So why? Maybe we can go and talk to the resident and say, look, we got like the special promo to the gym, or you can have that, or maybe you're interested in, I don't know, in calisthenics, and there's beautiful calisthenic lesson at this time of the day. You got this information, right? The problem with hospitality is that this information all around. That's another problem. And, because I think, and I don't want to say that grass is greener on the other side every single time, but I would say it's probably easier for you to fix this problem. In hospitality, you got another problem that you do not have in the rental space. That is the fact that when we get a guest, this guest probably went through hundreds of touch points. And these hundreds of touch points were with external distribution systems. Typical, you do it yourself. You want to book, you go on Google, then you go on booking.com, and then you read the review on maybe TripAdvisor, you go back to Agoda because there's a better price. Now somebody's writing something about the hotel in Reddit and so forth. When we got the final reservation, this guy left a lot of digital breadcrumbs, but on so many different distribution systems, so many different websites that we cannot reconstruct that, right? Because, and again, I'm the perfect example, I'm a mysterious guest for you, but because I did my homework somewhere else. And it's impossible for you to track exactly what I've done before, unless you sit down with me, you ask me, okay, why did you book? Okay, what did you do before that? And in the rental space, that's different because at the end of the day, there will not be 500 different people you talk to. It's the number of touch points is very limited to a certain extent. So now you can reconstruct the digital footprint of this user. And I think it's way easier. You're not there yet. And I think it's more because maybe you're not seeing the potential. And, there's some investment that needs to be done at the very beginning. We're not there yet. And I can tell you, we will never be there because of the problems I just told you. We don't have enough information from our guests, and when we do, there are 500 websites that we do not have control to.
I had one more question on the technology side, because ultimately, our listeners could be residential developers and operators, and with all this tech coming out, again, I'll use ITB as an example. There was a lot of hospitality tech. There's a lot of tech companies, all trying to say that, use our tech for this, use our tech for that. ultimately we want to be able to give some kind of feedback to these different residential developers to avoid this tech for tech's sake kind of trap. So how do we help these developers avoid this and ensure the technology actually enhances, the living experience?
It's very hard. Look, look, believe it or not, like I think over the last couple of years, 80% of my job has been consulting hotels only on the tech stack. And we're talking about, people that get in touch every day with these vendors, but still they do not understand completely. And sometimes we don't even understand because there's a lot of marketing, smoke and mirrors. And I'm pretty sure a lot of these tech players, they are in goodwill. They do have a very good product. The problem is, and Christian, you know the problem very well, is now you need to integrate with another 25 different systems, right? And this is where the problem starts. So how do you design to make sure you do not fall into the trap? I cannot recommend you one single vendor, but there are patterns that you can see in vendors, that will tell you that probably they will not tell you if they're good, but they will tell you at least that they will be future proof in a certain way. And of course, the first one is we still have a few systems in the industry that are legacy. So of course, it's something you want to avoid. So you want to go for the cloud. But you don't want to go for the cloud. You want to go for our cloud native systems, right? So something that is never spent one single moment in a physical server, right? And then of course it's API. So it's open APIs, of course, if possible, and good, robust documentation of these APIs. Now, if you do have that, even if you go with the wrong vendors, you can at some point make a U-turn and take another vendor, but you will not lose everything, right? Because it's for a lot of players, we got this in the hospitality space. I'm pretty sure you do have it too, to a certain extent. It's almost digital kidnapping. You're using a system because it's so hard now to get out of that system that's going to be problematic. On top of that, especially now, we live in a world where we really don't know what the needs of our users will be in 5 years. Probably we don't even know what the needs will be in 1 year. You really need to be super fluid when you design everything, right? And the fluidity only comes with tech agnosticism. So you need to make sure that you build for something that can be pretty much plugged to any system you need, so you avoid this problem. IoT is a perfect example, right? You start implementing some level of IoT, and maybe you go with a cheaper option, but it's all proprietary. And now you got a problem because maybe they're not developing, with the right speed. You want to change, and now it will be a problem. You cannot change, and if you do, it will take a tremendous amount of time. The data you will not be able to get all the data and so forth. So I think there's a lot of tech analysis to do before you even start. But again, there are signs where if you can or cannot trust a specific vendor. For the designers themselves, I would say the main approach would be, don't assume that you need to design something because you think that is your typical customer, because that is not true. There's no such thing as a typical customer. And make sure that you can change your mind very quickly, especially when you build something, because the way users change their mind is very quickly.
No, that's great. And I think that's great, kind of advice for anybody looking at it. Don't lock yourself into a system. These legacy systems as well are old school, everything for the future, as well as going into the cloud. We have 2 more topics today before we wrap up today's conversation. The next one we're going to be talking about is, hybrid hospitality in the living spaces. Apart hotels are kind of bridging that gap between short-term stays and long-term rentals. Do you see a similar hybrid model emerging in the multifamily or built to rent, where, operators take more cues from the hotel industry while still providing this residential experience?
Totally. My main, I think we had this conversation a couple of times in the past, and it's always been one of the main questions I ask myself is, what is hospitality, right? And the main answer to me is that it's becoming like the lines are blurring every single day. Sure, to me, hybrid is the only way to go. And it's only the only way to go, even in terms of the level of tech this property will adopt. Doesn't matter if it's renting apartments, hotels, B&B. I published an article a few years ago, and this was before the whole ChatGPT thing. And I came up with this idea, and I said, look, in 20 years, we will not base our hotels on star rating or reviews. We will only base the properties based on the number of humans working in these properties, right? And I came up with three main ideas. The first one is like technocentric hotel, and it could be also technocentric building. You get in, you get out. It's pretty much as possible automated, no human interaction whatsoever, and that's fine. Some people will look for that, right? Or even people not looking necessarily for that for a period of their life, they want that, right? Let me give you an example. I moved to Paris a few years ago, and I spent almost 10 years in Paris, but I spoke no French when I arrived. To me, the human interaction was a freaking nightmare. If I had some way of getting into an apartment without having to talk to anybody, that would be great for me in that first couple of years. After I learned some French, I loved every single interaction I had with these crazy French people in my building, right? So it was me, but it was me in two different moments of my life. The second one is what I call the anthropocentric hotel. This is now a word that is being it's officially used by HSMAI, so we can talk about it. It kind of makes a little more sense. It's to me it's a property that is run 100% or very close to 100% by humans, right? And I would say there's something in the middle, and that's what I call to your point, a hybrid model, okay? Where you get, you automate what you can automate, but you still keep this level of personal touch. So I would say that if you just change the words, if you ask me whatever question for whatever industry, for in whatever way, the answer will always be hybrid to a moment where when talking about hybrid will make no sense, because for us, hospitality will be all of that. Apartment will be hospitality. Renting an apartment will be hospitality. Going to a 5-star hotel will be hospitality. Sleeping on a train will be hospitality. Squatting on a nightclub will be hospitality. Everything will be hospitality, right? So that's really my answer.
And in terms of the hybrid model, if we were also looking at it, that a building might have short and long term, it might have a hotel style and it might have rental style accommodation. Operationally, it's very difficult to operate and manage different types of lodging within one building. And we know that there isn't really yet the tech to kind of manage and operate the different types of lodging within one building, although it's coming, and we know that. What else? How would you kind of address that issue for operators that are looking to not just do hybrid, as in some of it's going to be tech, some of it's going to be human, but actually hybrid when we look at the different types of lodging that could happen, whether it's one night to 12 months, whether it's hotel to rental within one building, those operational challenges?
Look, I know the challenge firsthand, because when I told you at some point I became GM of this little chain of boutique hotels in Rome. And the first one we launched was in a building, and at the very beginning we only had the third, if I remember correctly, the third floor. The rest was offices, people living there. And it was very complicated, as you say, right? My main problem was just trying to make sure that the experience for people living there and the experience for people just staying there for a few nights were not clashing to each other, right? And I think that's the big problem. And I wouldn't even say this is something to do with the tech. It has probably more to do with the design of what you do, right? So if you go with an hybrid solution from day one, if you design it right, you can remove a lot of friction from day one. Technologically speaking, and of course, hospitality vendors are very vertical. So that is why if you need a simple CRM, you would not go for Salesforce in the hospitality space, even though Salesforce is better, but it's not vertical for your industry. So I would say that the main problem here could be to make sure that hospitality vendors can, to a certain extent, coexist with the structure of these other industries. But you go back to my answer. That is why you really need to future-proof yourself, and that is, just going with as much as possible with open APIs. So in that case, you can actually build something on top of these vendors. But as a hybrid solution, I can totally see that. Totally see that. But I would say it would probably, and I think the more of these properties we will start to see, the more normal it will become. Again, up to a certain point where it will be completely normal to have guests and residents in the same buildings. In the meantime, probably it's more a question about designing the space in a way that nobody's suffering from this coexistence. We do have this problem, for example, in hospitality, when you got a very mice and leisure oriented property. Now your main problem will be the coexistence of 50 executives from a big pharma just going there to work and 50 people that just want to go to the bar by the pool. So still you got this problem. Even in hospitality, you got this problem because these are very different experiences from different users. It's all about designing it right.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. And what I've noticed, Simone, is you really come with a human-centric perspective, don't you, when you're looking at everything, really, not just technology, but the operations and everything. You really do come from that, human-centric perspective. Which is
big
very
time.
Interesting.
Big time. Look, I wanted to be, I think, Christian, you know that, I wanted to be a philosopher. So when I started, to me, hospitality, I started working in hotels because I was paying my university, but I wanted to be a philosopher. That's what I wanted to do. A lot of people accuse me of being anti-human. That doesn't make any sense because if anything, I'm totally pro-human. It's just that, to me, what we're doing now, it's human interaction. But if you come to my hotel and I charge your credit card, that's really not human interaction. It's what I call post-human hospitality, So it's not anti-human. Is let humans do what they do best. Let machines, whatever they are, AI, RPA, robotics, do what machines do best. And sometimes we forget, I think.
I think the philosophy background makes complete sense for a futurist. So it's a perfect combination, isn't it? But I know, Christian, you want to let us get to the next topic, the last topic, because I could talk to you all day, Simone, I'm afraid, but we do have to bring it to a bit of an end.
Yeah, no, I think this is a good last question. Is we're talking about the future and futurist and philosophy. I think just a quick point. Although we're using technology, we still have the human involvement here in this conversation. Even though we're on a digital source, we're still chatting to each other. So although we're using the machines to do what they do best, because it would save us the flight tickets to go over there and record, but we're going to shift over to the future because I know this is one of the main topics that we'd like to discuss with you, especially being a futurist. The pandemic obviously accelerated trends like remote work, home office setups like where I am right now, and integrated co-working spaces in residential buildings. Now, how do you think developers in co-living, build-to-rent, multifamily, whatever it may be, should be rethinking their spaces to align with these evolving lifestyle demands?
Well, that's a very good one. I would say that traditionally we always thought about home as a static construct, right? Something that you need to adapt your rhythm around. I would say that it's completely the other way around, right? So pandemic did not change anything. If anything, it accelerated the trend. But because right now it's my typical example where I am right now. This is where my room now. 50% of my room is an office. 50% is a Zendo. So basically, I can work here, then I can sit here and maybe read a book and so forth. This has been designed specifically with that in mind. So it's more about creating dynamic interface for work, for rest, for meditation, for creation, and so forth. If you want to be pragmatic, that is something I hate, but give you an example is acoustics. Why we need to focus more on acoustics now, or noise canceling windows, maybe. It's because I'm working here and I'm recording a podcast now. If I don't have that, I cannot work here. This is the space adapting to my rhythms rather than me adapting to the rhythm of the space. So to me, it's more about, it's not about the space. It's no longer a spatial problem. It's more a conceptual problem to a certain extent, right? So did COVID change anything? No. But it put us in this position now that you didn't have before, that if you're working and, you are in a noisy street, that's a problem. That's a problem you didn't have before, right? Because you were going to the office. Maybe you didn't know your room was noisy up until that point. So again, that is why we need more philosophers. It's more about the concept. Architects designers should sit down and understand the rhythm, the human rhythm, and build around that rather than the other way around.
And that might be the big shift that is happening, isn't it? Is that we are looking at space in a different way, upside down than perhaps before, which is also why what we explore on this podcast is that instead of looking at the rental sectors from a kind of capital expenditure perspective, it's looking at it from a different perspective, where it's putting the resident experience at the center. And that's not for being fluffy or any of those things. It's actually, is that not where the future's going? And that's where, businesses need to be in order to attract and retain customers.
Can I tell you something? Because just to reiterate, I think up until a certain point, we call everything that is built around guests for hospitality and residents, in your case, we call it personalization. But I think it doesn't even make sense. It will not make sense in a few years. I would say that in a few years, if you rent an apartment or if you go to a hotel and this is not being built around you, that will be perceived as under personalization. So you see the shift to me is here. Okay. So it's not really fluffy. It's not for the marketing. It's not because we need to push a marketing narrative that we guest-centric or resident-centric. Is you want to rent these spaces in 10 years, if you do it like that, they will not come. That's it.
Yeah, build it and they will come.
Exactly.
Simone?
That's a great reference.
Yeah. Simone, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and there's a lot to think about. And I think there's so much that your knowledge can give to the rental sectors. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And what is coming up? Like, how can people get in touch with you? What do you have coming up?
Boy, what I do not have coming up. So I published a book last year. I'm now translating it finally into English. I wanted to take care of the translation myself. So I hope this will be out somewhere in Q3. And it's all about artificial intelligence, decentralization, and spatial computing in the hospitality space. I'm launching another consulting firm that is basically focused on integrating AI into hospitality. Because, like to Christian's point, it's not about finding the best tech vendor. It's really about understanding the whole ecosystem. So that's a lot of that. I will probably squeeze another book in by the end of the year. Let's see how it goes. And then I'm doing quite a lot of work with the guys at Hospitality.net that maybe you're familiar with, and we're launching something I cannot really talk about right now, but it's going to be pretty cool.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Simone, just from the, myself, it's always a pleasure to talk to you and have these conversations on podcasts with you. Maybe you should launch another firm looking at the living sector outside hotels, because I think you got a lot to offer to them as well.
Sure. Well, I will send you a quote.
Thanks, Simone, for joining. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.